Hello and welcome to the Miles Irvin Show. I'm your host, Miles, and this is episode 2 of the Over Under series. This is a series where we take a look at every team's projected win totals for the upcoming NBA season, and I decide whether I think that they are going to win more games or less games. In episode 1, we took a look at all the teams in the Atlantic Division. Now we're going to shift over to the Western Conference and talk about the Southwest Division. Before we get started, if you would like, please leave a comment with your predictions for this division and these teams' win totals. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing your guys' opinions about these divisions because, really with every division and every team, the league has so much parity this season. Really, you could make a case for anything with every team, and I couldn't say that you're wrong. So definitely leave a comment if you want to, share your opinions. I'd love to read those. But let's get into the Southwest Division. So here are the 5 teams. We've got the Mavericks, Rockets, Grizzlies, Pelicans, and the Spurs. So where do we start off with? Should we go? Let's start off with a team that was one of the biggest disappointments in the NBA last year, and that was the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks this season are projected to win 44 and a half games. Now, last year, after they traded for Kyrie Irving mid-season, their season fell off. They ended up missing the play-in entirely. They ended up tanking to try to get a draft pick to try to help their team in the front court, which ended up working out. They drafted they traded to get Derek Lively, and he's going to be a big piece for the Mavericks this season. They need something to help their front court because last year they were abysmal defensively, especially after the Kyrie Irving trade, mainly because having to give up Dorian Finney-Smith, who was such a versatile defender for that team. It was just a big loss for them, and the Mavericks definitely felt that. Having a starting lineup with Irving, Doncic, then basically Hardaway and Reggie Bullock as the power forward, that's not going to get it done defensively. If Reggie Bullock is your best defender of those 4, that's not good. And then Dwight Powell isn't the best, center either as far as defensively. So I think some of the additions that they made this offseason can definitely help them with signing Seth Curry back. This is going to be his 3rd stint with the Mavericks, which is crazy to even think. Grant Williams, getting him from the Boston Celtics. He is a terrific defensive player and definitely can show a lot of energy and bring a lot of passion, as we saw in the Eastern Conference Finals last year for the Celtics when he got into it with Jimmy Butler. Derek Jones Jr. is a good versatile defender. Derek Lively, as I mentioned in the draft. And in that starting 5 now, you replace Tim Hardaway and Reggie Bullock now with Josh Green and Grant Williams. Now, Josh Green is a solid perimeter defender, and he started a bunch of games in the second half of the season for the Mavericks. But will his three-point shot be able to be more consistent? That's going to be a key thing for the Mavericks because with all the offensive talent that they have with Kyrie, Luka, off the bench, Seth Curry, Tim Hardaway, it's going to be hard for teams to, stop those guys. They're going to want to focus on defending those great shooters. So Josh Green, Grant Williams, they're going to have to make some big shots. Derek Jones Jr., when he's in there, is going to have to be a good, versatile Swiss Army knife type player cutting into the middle. But the Dallas Mavericks, I think after last year, they should be really hungry to solidify their standing in the Western Conference after last year's utter disappointment. I think defensively they will still be below average, of course. These additions, Grant Williams and Derek Lively, it won't propel them to being like an elite defense or anything like that. But I think they should be able to hold their own offensively this time now that they have some more defenders to help them. And because of that, I think that the Mavericks are going to win over 44 and a half games. I think that they should be a playoff team. Of course, Luka and Kyrie is such an incredible backcourt offensively. Luka could be definitely in the running for MVP again this season. I think I picked him as my MVP heading into last year, but of course the Mavericks struggled. They didn't even make the play-in, which is still unbelievable considering the year before they made it to the Western Conference Finals. It's still crazy to think that was just 2 years ago. So we'll see how the Mavericks can play this season, but as far as their win total, I think I've got them on the over for at least a little bit over 44 and a half wins. Now to another team in Texas. Let's go to the Houston Rockets. projected at 31.5 wins. Now, this is a team that has been rebuilding over the last few seasons, and during the summer, they made a lot of moves to try to improve their roster. Of course, the signing of Fred VanVleet, getting him from Toronto, Dillon Brooks from Memphis, Jeff Green from Denver. Those are just a few of the additions that they made. They drafted Amen Thompson. I like the moves that the Rockets made. Now, of course, the Kevin Porter Jr. thing, he's going to be off their team. Hopefully he's out of the league because there's no place for any of what he's been doing in our league or in the league. But I think that the signings that Houston made, specifically the Fred VanVleet one, can be very good for them, at least this season, maybe next season. The leadership that he can provide with a team that I feel like is pretty immature as far as off the court wise and sometimes on the court when you look at Jalen Green. I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. Of course, Dillon Brooks does not have the best reputation. I mean, he did just have a terrific World Cup for Canada, but I don't think that I don't like the Dillon Brooks signing personally. I think they have too many of those guys with that kind of mindset anyways. But I think that Fred VanVleet and Jeff Green can provide that leadership and help out there. Of course, you got Jabari Smith heading into his second year. He played better in the second half of the year after, a horrible start to his rookie season. Alperen Şengün is one of my favorite guys to watch. He's such a good passer at that center position. I love watching those kind of guys. And Jalen Green is, poised to have another big breakout season. So now the 31.5 wins. So Houston, of course, they've been bad the last couple of years. And I think that these moves could potentially have them improving by 10 games, which is definitely saying something. Now, a 10-game improvement, that would put them at 32 wins, which would be half a game over. So I'm going over on the Rockets to win 32 games this season. I don't think that they are going to fight for any real play-in spot or definitely not the playoffs. But I think that the moves that the Rockets made, specifically Fred VanVleet, can help put them in position to improve, a lot. And that, again, that doesn't mean they have to make the playoffs or anything like that. But, some other depth pieces that they added, like getting Jock Landale, just signing. He was a terrific backup center for the Phoenix Suns last year. And, of course, you've got guys like Tari Eason, Jason Tate still developing in there as well. So the Rockets, definitely a fun young team to look out for this season. But despite having them on the over, I don't think they're going to do anything too crazy this year. Let's finish off the trifecta, the three Texas teams. Let's go to the San Antonio Spurs, who, of course, are making all the headlines with Victor Wembanyama. The Spurs got their guy, man. And, man, Wemby, he is something else, man. His rookie season, it may feature a lot of ups and downs as so I don't want to say smaller big man because the guy is like 7'4", but like lighter weight big man. He definitely is going to take some time to grow into his body. Similar to all rookies that are kind of like that. I mean, you look at Anthony Davis, Giannis is the popular one. Evan Mobley is still one of those guys growing into his body. I think it's going to be a similar thing with Victor Wembanyama. It's going to be another season of development for the Spurs because their roster still isn't, that crazy. I mean, Keldon Johnson, Devin Vassell are very solid players. They had good 20-point-per-game seasons last year, but no one was really watching the Spurs last year, unlike how it's going to be this year. Everyone's going to be watching the Spurs, at least at the start of the season, probably throughout, to see how Victor Wembanyama plays. But, there are a lot of rumors that they're going to start Victor Wembanyama at the 4 with Zach Collins, which I think is very interesting because that would most likely mean that Jeremy Sohan would come off the bench. And I think that Jeremy Sohan could be a very good player for the Spurs. He seems like a Spurs-esque player. Like, he could turn into, like, a Boris Diaw type player. Just because he can do a little bit of everything, but he's still a raw prospect as well. Trey Jones re-signed with the Spurs. He was a good, young point guard for them, but I definitely think that that's a spot where they're going to look to improve as their rebuild goes on. And then they traded for a bunch of veterans this offseason, acquiring Reggie Bullock, Jetty Osman, Cameron Payne, but they just released Cameron Payne so he can go off and try to find a contender to sign with. The Spurs, I think with this offseason, they got the guy they wanted. This is going to be, last year was really the first year of this rebuild after trading DeJounte Murray. So I don't think that they are really ready to start like competing or anything like that. But I know Pop is still there. Anything can happen when Greg Popovich is your head coach. But to me, I think they're still going to be one of the worst teams in the Western Conference. So I've got them on the under for 28.5 wins. Now the Memphis Grizzlies. Memphis is at 46.5 wins. Now, of course, that is a huge step down from the last couple seasons, but Ja Morant, of course, suspended for the first 25 games of this season. Now, the Grizzlies did an amazing job of getting insurance for that position by getting Marcus Smart. They just really, out of nowhere, just went in and took Marcus Smart from the Celtics. They gave up Tyus Jones to Washington. Tyus Jones was one of the best backup point guards in the NBA over the last few years, one of the most efficient as far as, taking care of the ball. It wasn't too crazy as far as his turnovers would go. Always one of the best, one of the leaders in the league as far as assist to turnover ratio goes. As a guy coming off the bench, and he was one of the reasons why when the Grizzlies would be injured with Ja Morant, that they would still win games. That's a huge reason why they still had, number 2 seeds in the Western Conference the last 2 years. Now, while Ja Morant is out replacing with Marcus Smart, I think that's going to be great defensively. Desmond Bane should explode to start the year as the number 1 option for that team. Jaren Jackson Jr. coming off of a Defensive Player of the Year, but this rough go with USA Basketball, I'm sure he's going to want to prove the doubters wrong after, just a rough showing in the last few games of the tournament. Now, the one thing I think to watch with the Grizzlies is their three-point shooting, because when you look at their team as far as like consistent three-point shooters, obviously Desmond Bane, an elite three-point shooter, Luke Kennard, best in the league last year percentage-wise, but you look at the rest of this roster, I mean, it's a bunch of, inconsistent 34, 35, 36% three-point shooters. When you look at Jaren Jackson, Marcus Smart has always been a very streaky shooter. John Conchar is going to get to play. Santi Aldama is going to get to play, a lot more minutes as well with, still one more spot in there. And, of course, I think an underrated signing is the Derrick Rose signing. I don't hear a lot of people talking about it, but him being there as that leader, I think that could really help the Grizzlies, having Derrick Rose back there as a leader and someone that I think can still play, solid minutes at the point guard position. He really didn't get to play in New York because Tom Thibodeau wanted to go with a more defensive-minded guy with Deuce McBride over there in New York. But I think that Derrick Rose could be a solid, underrated piece for the Grizzlies. So 46.5 wins, I think that's pretty low, even with Ja out for the first 25 games. I still have them on the over because you replace him with a Defensive Player of the Year from just 2 years ago. They have the last 2 DPOYs in their starting lineup. And, of course, Desmond Bane is still a solid defender, and he's a terrific three-point shooter. Steven Adams is a big bruiser down there. I think the Grizzlies are going to be just fine, even with the loss of Ja Morant to start the year. Final team is the New Orleans Pelicans at 44.5 wins. Now, the Pelicans are in a group of 3 teams that I think are really difficult to figure out. I feel like they're all in the same tier, and that is the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, and the Thunder. I think those 3 are all super close together. I guess as they were last year, they all finished, right next to each other in that play-in picture in the Western Conference last year. Now this year, how will that go for the Pelicans for their perspective? Which of those 3 teams is going to have the breakout? Because it's bound to happen. I don't think that those 3 teams are going to be just average teams again. I think that, they all have too good of rosters for one of them to not break out and have a great year. Now, the Pelicans definitely have potential for that. They have one of the most talented rosters in the NBA, but they can never stay healthy. They can never stay healthy. It's unbelievable, whether it's Zion or Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum or even Trey Murphy, unfortunately. He's out for the first 10, 12 weeks. Well, he's out for 10, 12 weeks as of like a week ago. So probably a month or 2 to begin the year. I cannot trust their health. I think that New Orleans is extremely talented, but they have not shown me that that they can be healthy enough to consistently win enough games to do any real, sort of damage in the standings. So I would take the Timberwolves and the Thunder over the Pelicans just because of the injuries. Now they have a super deep roster, but you know, having that is there's only so much you can do with having a deep roster when roles are constantly having to be switched around. Like, all these guys have to play different roles when, the guys ahead of them are injured. So, it's just tough to find a rhythm in that sense. And for that reason, I've got the Pelicans on the under for 44.5 wins. I think that they could still be in the play-in picture, and they might have a great, ending to the regular season. I think that the Trey Murphy injury is a huge hit for them because I love Trey Murphy. Brandon Ingram, of course, is very, very good. I know he's, similar to Jaren Jackson. A lot of those guys on USA Basketball, he's going to want to prove, those guys wrong, or the fans wrong, after the lackluster performance. So the Pelicans, I've got them on the under, but I would not be surprised at all if they were the team in the Western Conference to break out and have a great season. And just like that, that is it for the Southwest Division. Like I said at the beginning of the video, let me know in the comments if you agree with my predictions, and let me know if you have a different opinion. I'd love to see your opinions on all these teams as well. If you enjoyed this video, a like rating would be greatly appreciated. I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Miles, and I'll catch you in the next one.